Hi, Derek. Can you hear me?
Hola.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? Can you hear me, Derek?
Hmm.
Hello.
I
Yes.
couldn't hear you there. Okay. Now I can hear you. For some reason, my computer is not.
Hmm.
Okay, now it's fine. Okay, good.
Great, great, great to see you, Derek. So thank you very much
You too.
for joining us in this Chile conversation that I call them. just just to put these two worlds together that are so important to me. So thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. It's so great to reconnect and see all these friends from over the years, some of whom I've been in touch with, some I have not. So, such a pleasure.
Thank you, thank you. And Derek, I always like to start this conversation by asking the guest, where are you from? Where were you born? And how music came into your life?
Well, I was born not very far from here, actually. I haven't not moved very far, only a few miles. I was born in Manhattan, in New York City. Um, so music came into my life, really before I remember. I used to, according to my mother, I used to sing songs when I was 1 or 2 years old, and I was told by, and my parents were told by many people that I would be a musician before I really remember any of that. So who knows? I guess I was a sound kid. I was always interested in sound more than in what the world looked like. I was more interested in what it sounded like. So I was always very attuned to the vibrations around me. Um, but I guess I really started formal music when I was about 7. I played the clarinet,
Mhm.
and that became my pathway into music. But then my grandmother got me a piano from a relative, a very used, beat up piano, not very good, but good enough for me to start composing. And and then I remember I went to a music camp one year when I was about 12, and uh, I heard a composition by Olivier Messiaen.
Mhm.
I had been writing little pieces on the piano, my own kinds of pieces for myself and my friends. But then when I heard this piece called 20 regards sur l'enfant Jésus, 20 views of the infant Jesus, and I thought to myself, I looked at the name on the program and I said, I don't know who this is, Olivier Messiaen. I had no idea. But I said, whatever he does, that's what I want to do, you
Mhm.
know. And so then I had this idea since I was that age that I wanted to be a composer. And I would go to the library and take out records, LP records,
Yeah.
and listen to them, whatever I could find of contemporary music, even things like complete works of Webern,
Mhm.
very strange. I would bring them home. My parents thought this is a strange kid. He's listening to this stuff. But whatever it was, but anything that was new, which at that time, Webern recordings of Webern were not that old, actually. So in the 70s, when I was a little kid, in the 80s. But at the same time, I was very interested in jazz, and I heard Thelonious Monk, and that was a real uh, revelation for me musically. And still, I would say Monk is probably maybe the biggest influence on me harmonically. But but at the same time, I was playing music on the clarinet, and I always looked for the new music. My clarinet teacher was in the Metropolitan Opera, His name was Ben Armato, and he was a wonderful man, wonderful teacher, and he loved the old opera. You know, he loved Bellini, Puccini, Verdi. You know, of course, Verdi. I love Verdi, but great opera composers, Rossini. You know, an American. His parents were immigrants from Italy, from Sicily, but he understood that I wanted to be a composer. He understood this, and he said to me once, you know, I wish you would be wanted to be a clarinet player, but being a composer is a sacred calling, and everything that you do, every note you write, each note you write, you know, he was Italian, so he liked to exaggerate. He said, every note you write is more important than everything I did in my whole life. But you know, for your teacher to say that about a practice that was not what you were working with that teacher on, it made a big impression on me still about the importance of the composer. And even though he did not really love contemporary music, it still was very important for me to hear that and for him to embrace this and to say, okay, you want to learn Nielsen Concerto? Okay. You want to learn Copland Concerto? Okay. You want to learn, you know, Francais, Corleano, you know, anything you want, we'll do if you want to do it. And so for me, that was a real gift that he was open to that and the openness of the teacher to the world of the student that maybe could open him to new things. And because I played with a kind of jazz embouchure, I was learning to play jazz and playing on the clarinet and saxophone. Uh, he later told me that he switched his students to my embouchure, which I thought, I said to him, that's a terrible idea. He said, no, because you play with a kind of freedom. It's not it's not the way I learned, but it's interesting. And so I'm trying it with my students to see how they do with it. And so he was such an open teacher. So he taught me so much about music. You know, those early teachers, we owe them such a debt, you know.
Yeah, wow, what a beautiful experience, and to have a teacher like him. And while I was listening to you, I was curious to know. I mean, it's amazing that you realized that you wanted to compose in such an early age. Yeah, and you were curious about it, no?
Well, it was, you know, it's funny. I think composing is natural for kids. Whenever I work with kids of any age, I feel that it's very natural for them to want to compose, to sing, to play, to, you know, to make rhythm, to, you know, the drum and the voice is, that's it. You know, those are the basics. And so it's natural, but somehow we, we're told or we're made to feel that composing is some kind of very special thing that you can only do with X number of years of training. And I think it's too bad because just like all kids love to draw and kids love to write stories, they love to compose. They love to make things because kids are creative. And so I think it's kind of sad that we're told that composition is something special. I mean, it is something special, but it's also something universal. So I think that it should be natural. I suppose I had this just passion to keep writing music down on paper, and at the same time I was working on jazz, and so I was writing songs. I loved all the great music, Stevie Wonder and the Jackson Five. That was at the time when I was growing up. The pop music, of course, the Beatles, you know, um, and I love the great jazz singers like Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald. So that was also, you know, great American song was something I was very interested in, that tradition of popular music at the same time as all the classical music I was learning. And I've always felt that there was something in common between all these things. And also hip hop, because that was when I was a teenager, it was really coming up in New York. And so I was right in the epicenter of the birth of hip hop, which was very exciting, late 70s, early 80s.
Interesting, interesting. You know, I was thinking, especially what you said before about learning pieces like Corigliano, you mentioned, or Copland, no? Usually, as instrumentalists, we want to learn these pieces because are part of the repertoire, of course, but we spend so much time figuring out the technique or how to do this and this and this and this, that most of the time the students like miss that the reason you're doing this is because you want to get to know the piece, like to know how this piece is put together, no? But since our repertoire sometimes is so difficult and our instruments are so difficult to play, that you spend a lot of time learning these pieces, no?
Well, it's like when you spend time composing, you have an idea, but to put that idea down in a way that is comprehensible, and then to work on the details of the idea and to make sure it's exactly the right thing, the right, not only the right chord, but the right inversion of the chord, the right inflection in the melody. All those details take a lot of time, and that's maybe what takes the most time, even though it's working out the details. They say inspiration is 1% and perspiration is is 99%. So you know how that is with conducting. I mean, there's always something more you can study to know slightly better, to have the gesture that might be a little bit clearer, and it's a lifetime, and you never finish. It's our big unfinished work is our life.
Yes,
you
yes.
know so
No, I love what you said about the little kids that are so creative and compose it should feel like drawing or even writing, no? It's great. I never thought of it like that, and I feel like now I want to compose.
do it because I think it's just like how I've conducted. I'm not a great conductor, but I think it's important for personal growth too, that when you're a composer, sometimes someone asks you to step up on the podium and show. Even if they don't want you to conduct the concert, they might want you to show. But even there were some cases with St. Paul Chamber Orchestra or Rocco, these other orchestras where I've been asked to conduct my piece or to conduct a program, and sometimes it happens by accident because somebody else cancels or there's a problem with scheduling, and you need to, maybe somebody's late, like how Bernstein got his first big gig. But it's the kind of thing where you have to be prepared, and also it's a good education for yourself, because as a composer, as a conductor, there are these things that composers write, and you banging your head against the wall saying, why didn't they write this? Why didn't they write that? If they would have been so much easier if they just shifted the time signature, one measure or something. But this is what you learn as a composer from conducting. So I think similarly, if you just try your hand composing something, you will put yourself in the mindset of the composer, and that's probably the most important thing, is putting your head with that blank page in front of you, and you're looking, you're looking at this, That's hard. I mean, it's also hard to look at the notes, but it's really hard to look at the blank staff.
Yeah, this is great.
So I'm encouraging you.
Yeah, no, I will.
Yeah.
Well, during this time, I have been also coming back to my piano playing. That is not great, but it helps me so much, of course, to play the scores. But I have always also writing down some of the pieces that I feel like fragments of pieces that I feel I should study this more. So I write it down in your staff music, and so I can get a sense of how it's written, no? It's a really fantastic way of learning, which I have like putting into action during the pandemic, that I have more time to do it, no?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a beautiful opportunity. Time is such a luxury, you know.
yeah.
Um, and it's funny, I learned to orchestrate by orchestrating piano pieces because I studied in Israel with this is before I was at Michigan. I went to work with a guy named Andre Haidu, who was an interesting himself. I mean, he had been a student of Kodai, and then he worked with Kodai for 10 years, traveling around Hungary, collecting folk songs. And then Messiaen and with Mio, uh, and then and then he moved to Israel. He married an ex-nun, and they moved together to Israel. So there you go. But they anyway. He lived in Jerusalem, and I went to his house, and I would study with him every week. We would do two piano pieces by a different composer, right, starting with Haydn, Mozart, you know, Schumann, Brahms, up to Bartok and Stravinsky, Ligeti, and we would take a piano piece, and I would have to orchestrate two piano pieces each week in the style of, and um, and so playing through those pieces, and then trying to figure out how would this composer think about the orchestra, and try to put yourself in their mindset. I think it's a wonderful way to play. You know, when you're playing their piano music, to be thinking as a conductor, it must be wonderful. What did you play? Which pieces?
Oh, I have been studying, well, Ginastera, Sweet
Oh,
Stanza, amazing, no? Really amazing.
great piano music.
Brahms, Requiem, um,
What Kinastera are you doing?
the Estancia Suite.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Estancias. Yeah, that's a great piece.
And
Great.
what else? Dvorak, New World Symphony. You know, pieces that I have done before, but I thought I wanted to profound my study, no, and see what this is all about. And it has been really incredible to realize about so many things that I didn't see before, no. It's fantastic.
Well, when you came to America, it must have been very interesting to when you came. Did you was Michigan the first time you came to the U.S.?
No, I was in the south of in Georgia before for 3.5
Oh,
years. Yeah,
oh, okay, okay.
very
Uh, it,
different.
and
Amazing.
yeah, Georgia. Yeah,
Yeah,
you were in the South and the North. Yeah.
yeah.
Where were you in Georgia?
I was in Columbus, Georgia, which is like
Oh,
an
Columbus
hour and a
State.
half from Atlanta. Yeah,
You were at Columbus State?
it used to be called Columbus College. Now it's Columbus State University.
Oh, because I know a violinist who teaches there, Sergio.
Yeah,
Uh,
Schwartz.
yeah,
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 he's there now.
yes, that's right. He brings because I teach in the summer in Bowdoin, in Maine, and
Uh-huh.
Sergio brings many young students to work with him, and they're fabulous, fabulous students. Yeah,
Mm.
so it has a very strong music school, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Uh, and then you came to Michigan,
And then I went to Michigan. Yeah,
and you worked with Paul Cantor, who's a
with Paul.
great teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. And
I
I met,
remember, do you remember Gabe Bolkowski?
yeah, of
Gabe.
course.
So Gabe was my roommate 1 year and or 2 years maybe, and I went to a lesson with Gabe. We were working on Bartok contrasts,
Uh-huh.
and Paul was teaching. And I remember that Gabe was asking him about something. I can't remember what, but Paul said to Gabe, he said, "Gabe, seek meaningful experiences." And I always remember that. It was, for some reason, that stuck in my head.
Mm.
Seek meaningful experiences.
Mm.
And boy, those three words, that's pretty powerful, a pretty
Wow.
powerful mantra for trying to live your life as a musician,
Mm.
maybe just as a human being.
Absolutely. Wow. Seek meaningful experiences. Good. Good lesson.
Yeah. What did you get from Paul? I mean, that was important for you. Because then you went on to become a conductor. This is even before. I know you were.
I was interested in conducting. You know, something that I still treasure about Paul is that uh, he he made me realize that everything was possible. No, but in a very like I, the way that he did it, I wasn't really sure how. No, like I will start doing things with my instrument that I would never thought I would be able to. No, it was like an unconscious way of doing things. But I'm sure it was his. And what I love about him too is that he taught differently to each of us. You know, there was not an only way of doing things. And it is interesting for me to hear this story about Gabe, because uh, we are also different. For some reason, I could not imagine him telling this to me, but because we are different with Gabe. But at the same time, I could imagine why he said that to him, no? And
Yes, I mean, well, you were already seeking these experiences. I mean, here you were in a different country with a different
yeah,
language,
yeah,
and you were seeking new experiences. And
yeah.
you know,
My challenges were other
yes,
things.
of course, yeah.
So this very beautiful for me to hear this, that you shared this with me. Interesting, very interesting.
Well, I mean, we all have different challenges, and the both as people, I think, and then sometimes there's overlap between our challenge as a person and our challenge as a musician, but sometimes there are very different things that we need to challenge ourselves with. Um, and I think a great teacher can bring that out in the student because they are looking at you as opposed to just looking at themselves. There are a lot of teachers. I mean, there are many great teachers in a way that I don't know if they're really great teachers, but they are. You can absorb a lot from a great musician, even if they're not a great teacher, because you just around them, you see how they work, you talk to them, you absorb by osmosis. But in that way, you are a great student, as opposed to they are a great teacher. But there are those great teachers who unlock something because they are so attentive to what the student needs or I was going to say at one time I would have said they are attentive to what the student lacks, but now I wouldn't say that. I would say they're attentive to what the student has that's special. What because the lack, we all lack things, and sometimes people are perfect musicians. They're unbelievable, but that's it's not that it's something we lack, but they can cultivate the thing that's beautiful and that can bring something so unusual to the world.
Mm. Well, Paul Cantor said to me once, since we're talking about him, he says, Alejandra, he said, just think about this. Your virtues can also be your weaknesses. And he was talking to me about my bow arm, because he loved my bow arm because he said it was so dolce, no? But and it was
Yeah,
very natural to me to play like this. But he was trying to tell me also that, but that can also be a weakness, because you need to also develop this other way of playing, no? So you see, it's so different for each of us. So which is fantastic, no?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and um, and sometimes also, sometimes it's ourselves, but sometimes it's the situation we face. Like now, we are in this pandemic; it imposes something from without, and then we have to react to that as individuals. And maybe we cannot use like here you are, this great conductor. Suddenly, you have no orchestra to conduct. So how do you deal with that as a human being, as a musician? How do you grow during this period? And that's I mean, I think we all have this challenge during this period is how to, what kind of contribution can we make, as opposed to just feeling sorry for ourselves,
Yeah,
about, well, we can't do this particular thing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Derek, going back to music and to art, I'm curious to know how is your creative process?
Ah,
What,
well, again, I try to change it. It depends on what I'm doing. I mean, because I've written, symphonic music, I've written solo music, I've written songs, pop music,
mhm,
uh, done arrangements with hip hop artists, work with jazz people, salsa musicians,
mhm,
but and now I'm writing both an opera and a music theater piece.
mhm.
Actually, the music theater, they both have University of Michigan connection,
Ah,
interestingly. But I think the process is very different. Right now with opera, for example, my desk is filled with all this crap here, and I'm looking, but you can see, for example, I'm working with this writer, Sandra Cisneros, who lives in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, and we're working on an opera based on her uh, her story, The House on Mungo Street. And so, which is also in Spanish, by the way, you can see. But the so my process, if you look, I'm not sharing screen, but if you look, you can kind of see the text and what I did, where I started to write notes. I'm just writing rhythms and kind of contour of the pitches, but
mhm.
then I start to write chord changes and individual notes, and then putting it right next to the text, right? And from there, I would go to something like this. I don't know, you know, something like this, maybe, uh, where you see, uh, the actual music on the staff. Then eventually it goes to the computer, but
Ah,
that's the physical process
right,
anyway. Yeah.
right. And how is it before that? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
do you have, or let's say, for example, we have a wonderful writer, Chilean writer. Her name is Isabel Allende.
Oh yeah, of
Yeah,
course. Yes.
and
Very famous.
I went to one of her lectures, and she said that no, every day she sits on her studio for 3 hours, and she sits there and waits that things will come up. Sometimes she will write 1 page, 2 pages, and sometimes she will just write just one line,
Hmm.
no,
Yeah.
and she will tell herself it's okay, it's okay,
Yeah.
it's part of my process, no, the way she works.
Yeah.
and I'm sure that also gives her some secure feeling that I'm doing my work, but sometimes I'm not so effective, no, or productive. How is it for you? Do you have a specific routine, or it just comes out of necessity?
It depends where you are in the process, and also different pieces arrive in different ways. Sometimes I often start with a gesture, a kind of musical or almost physical kind of musical gesture, and then sometimes I try to write it down, but quite often I let it just go around in my head for a long time, maybe weeks or years, sometimes, months. I just keep it and I see what remains, because some gestures, some things, I do have a kind of trust that the important stuff will remain and the other things will go away.
Mhm.
So sometimes, though, that gesture comes out of an idea. Like I spent many years in different places studying different traditions of music making. So whether it was in Bulgaria, some of the Thracian folk style, or in Brazil, or um, or other in Ghana, when I was in Michigan, actually, that was when I went to Ghana, and studied the xylophone. And sometimes in the process of learning a tradition or experiencing some kind of musical input that was different than what I was trained, than the way I was trained, I had a kind of epiphany,
Mm.
a moment where I thought, that's strange. What is that? That's very unusual. That way of thinking about music, not just the music that I was playing, but the whole way of thinking about it.
Mm.
Um, for example, in West African music, the thing that was, I knew it, I mean, on paper, but I knew that people often felt two rhythms simultaneously very naturally. And that was the way people made music there. But to actually experience that oneself is a very different feeling in the context of the dance there and the music there and making music with other people. Um, and that difference in concept and context would might spur an idea
Mm.
about the way of thinking about music when I got home, and I would think, um, how can I somehow conjure that way of thinking in a different context? And
Mm.
I think that, a lot of what I found was the really great West African musicians like Bernard Woma, who I studied with on the xylophone. Um, Bernard thought that way too. So I would often find people who were traditional musicians in Ghana who would say to me, oh no, Bernard, the problem with Bernard is he mixes styles. That's not good. So Bernard was, somebody who he would go, they say he'd take a song that's Fanti from this one tribe and mix it with Dagati. It's not good, you know? And I would say, oh, that sounds interesting. But of course, and so did Bernard. He thought that was interesting. So he brought everything into his music, including things he learned in America, in other places, in Germany, and he brought it in to his music and because that's the way that music kind of moves forward. Is I watched you conduct Mahler, the third movement of the resurrection, where the Jewish themes come in, and this is, he's bringing something in that's not typically in the German tradition
Mhm.
into his into and then he blends and he kind of says, oh, what if I took this kind of folk music that and I bring it into this place. What happens? What's the transformation? And I think composition is a lot about transformation.
Mm. Great. Transformation. Yeah, it is. Great, Derek. Thank you. But have you ever been in a moment in which you feel stuck in your compositions?
Every day.
And what do you do?
Well, sometimes I improvise. I just play a song. I sing a song. I play something. I try some, because just like conducting, I think there are different. I don't know how you think about this, but there's different stages of what you need to do. Sometimes,
Mhm.
there's in composing, like I showed you, there's the stage where you're just working with text or you have an abstract idea for a kind of gesture, and a movement, a melody, a rhythm, something like that. That these are the very incipient stages, but there are also stages where you need to refine the composition and work on the details. So maybe in a moment, there's orchestration, there's counterpoint, working on harmonic kinds of things, transitions, I suppose. But there and then there are even just very boring things. Well, I suppose I think of them as boring, like editing the computer. So in some ways,
Yeah.
if you're in a certain mindset and you cannot get out of that mindset, maybe the best thing to do is to try to move into a different work zone,
Mm.
different stage. Okay, I'm going to now work on this thing over here, but I'm not going to work on the um, the trying to generate something melodic content or harmonic content, I'm going to work on um, making sure the grace notes are correctly written here. You know, something that's much more uh, straightforward in a
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
and like just busy work. I mean, how do you approach that as a conductor?
Oh yeah, I do the same thing. You know, if my mind is not really on, I probably will start putting bowings and, you know, like copying things that don't really need my like full creative attention, because sometimes it just doesn't happen, no?
And it's huge. I mean, you to do something like Resurrection, which you did, it's an enormous task to learn that piece in a way that where, you know, these are young musicians, they're looking to for guidance. I saw people were looking at you. I mean, that, you know, whereas if it was another orchestra, it might be, you know, kind of not looking to you as much, but here they were looking to you for this interpretation. And I was thinking, how do you begin to sketch that out, that map of that? And then you must have to work on the micro and macro level on in all different kinds of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fascinating thing about this project is that we have time to work on the piece. So because also the choir is a choir that is formed by people that have never sang before. So maybe it might be the first time that they sing in a choir. So there's a process that goes through the project that I think is fabulous. Also personally, in the sense that you have more time to get the piece, to go inside the piece, and also like you said before, no, like sometimes there are things that occur in your mind, but there are others that occur like in as an interaction. So, and I love when there is the moment to rehearse, because you have this idea in your mind and then you have to materialize it into sound. And when you have time to do that, it's fabulous, no?
And
Because at the
scary,
end,
right?
yeah, and scary, of course, because at the end, what we want is we want to hear
Yeah.
what you see in the score. and and this is actually something that I do tell the musicians, no, we're not going to do something if we don't show it 150%, because if it doesn't make any sense, better not do it, no.
Yeah.
So it has to be like very like straightforward, and I love that process of rehearsing, where you explore, you try things, and of course you have to have a group of musicians that are also willing to do that, no.
Well, yeah, you had what's nice is you had like what Mahler had, you know, all these time to rehearse. I had that experience in China when I was playing my clarinet concerto, and uh, and I thought, wow, this is a tough piece for the, you know, maybe difficult for this orchestra, but when I got there, they had already rehearsed 8 times my piece.
Wow.
So they had a sense of how to do it, the techniques, you know, the very interesting techniques. And where I had the breakthrough was I said, I was trying to explain to the conductor about it, and we were talking, and he said, well, it's, you know, I was singing some of these glissandi that I wanted them to play, which were like spoken sounds, and then we realized that it was like Beijing, the Peking opera, you know, Beijing,
Huh?
the opera, the very kind of mannered singing, you know, which was like, "Ah, you know, and so he heard that and he said, oh, it's like, and then I heard him say, you know, Peking opera to the orchestra, and they were all, oh, okay, you know, and then they started to play it differently. And it was that very magical moment which transformed their performance, but only through all these rehearsals was it possible. And of course, usually with orchestra, you don't have time. And as a composer, you have to be very attentive to how little time an orchestra will usually have to learn your piece, which is a shame in a way, but it has to make you economical about how you notate the music.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the beauty also of working with a composer. At least personally, I love when the composer comes to the rehearsal and the composer explains something and you get this image. It's like, oh, now it makes sense, no? And it's so great when
Or
that
maybe
happens.
sometimes it's like, oh, now it doesn't make sense.
Well, I guess that can happen too. No, but it's just beautiful because um, and I think that's what music should be too. Like it takes you to the world of imagination, no? That this world of possibilities, and and I think it's extraordinary when you have the opportunity to work with a composer, and because sometimes sometimes the music is not easy to realize, no? But when you have the opportunity to, it's just it's a life experience to have
What
that
was
moment.
some of your interesting experiences working with composers?
Uh, well, just like that. Let's see if I can recall one that comes easily. No, for example, I happen to be part of one of a competition here in Chile. Is called Luis Advis, which is one of the main composers here in our
Yeah.
country, and it was three different three pieces that made it to the finals. And again, it was the same idea. Like you have the scoring set in front of you, and you make a picture of how the music should sound, no, and then you go to the rehearsal and you get this sound, and sometimes like, wait, this, sometimes it's like that. But then when the composer comes and gives you maybe just tiny suggestions, not even suggestion, but what the piece is about, it just
The
makes
context, yeah.
huge difference. And but I also feel this is also happens with any other pieces, Mozart, Haydn, Brahms. When you have a context in your mind, it's a total different experience. No?
Yeah, but there's a performance practice with those composers. Whereas, so I always tell composers, they don't know you. The orchestra musicians, they would love to know you, but they don't know you. So they're trying to figure you out through the music, and that's the only way they have.
Mm.
And you have to assume that you maybe you cannot be there every time, and so somehow you have to transmit that through through the music. Uh, and it's a challenge on both sides, I think. Also for the composer has to be attentive to that moment. What do people ask you? Why are they asking you that? What are they getting and what are they not getting? And I think that's a challenge.
And for you, like when you started writing pieces for orchestra, for example, your first pieces that you wrote for orchestra,
Oh,
how was it? How was the experience? Because like you said, like people will start asking you questions, and then you probably feel, wait, but I thought this was very clear, you know?
yeah. Well, it's a process. I mean, my first orchestra piece I wrote when I was 14 or 15, and it was I even wrote the violins at the top because there were more of them, so I thought they should be at the top. And I didn't know what I was doing, but luckily I had a wonderful conductor of my youth orchestra, and so I was playing clarinet in this orchestra, and I showed up with this big manuscript. This is 1983, 84, something like that. And so he looked at it and he said, "Okay, we'll do it." And so I made the parts for everybody, and I heard it, and it went okay. After a year, I wrote probably by the time I wrote my first work piece that allowed anybody to perform is actually my fifth piece for orchestra because it takes that long to really understand what the orchestra is doing. It's a long process. It's the orchestra has so many bells and whistles, we say in English. You know, there's just so many parts to it, and it takes a long time to understand how rhythm works inside an orchestra.
Mm.
It's that's the biggest, I think, issue for a young composer is to make rhythm work within the orchestra like a machine. That energy comes from the strings, and even a composer like Stravinsky who thinks about and you know whose music is so energetic and rhythmic, it's usually generated in the strings. Even though we hear the woodwinds a lot, the energy is in the strings. So we think the Rite of Spring, oh yeah, it's woodwinds, you know, and it's brass and it's percussion. But there's not that much percussion in the Rite of Spring. The percussion is in the strings, you know. And so to understand that the strings is this generating force, and then these other instruments in their role, and understanding the limits of the orchestra from its establishment during the time of Haydn, I think, and understanding the roles, very clear roles of those instruments, and then how those have been stretched until now when the possibilities are much different than they were at that time. But still, there's that history, and if you can understand the history, just like, I mean, where we find ourselves now in history as people, if we understand history, hopefully we were not doomed to repeat the mistakes, you know. And I think the history, if we understand the history of the orchestra as composers, we can do a little bit better to expand and to make it a bigger world and to have something new and different to say, not try to do the same thing that was already done, but to reach in a different direction.
Right. Yeah. I'm, I'm with you there. Wonderful. Derek, why University of Michigan? Why did you go to study at University of Michigan?
Oh, by the way, I wanted to tell you that this is perfect for the Zoom era because I wanted to compete with, I saw Tim last week and I saw he had his Michigan shirt, but I don't have a Michigan shirt, but I do have Michigan sweatpants. And sweatpants are perfect for the Zoom era, right?
Yeah.
So my Michigan sweatpants are here. I don't want to get too crazy, but where is Michigan? Here it is.
Great.
So you can see that I have my perfect for Zoom, right? Um, but I went to Michigan to study with William Bolcom primarily because he was actually a friend of and a classmate in the class of Darius Milhaud with my teacher in Israel. So Andre Haidu. So Andre said to me when I left Israel, he said, you know, you should go to either one of two teachers. If you want to go to Europe, you should study with Kurtak, who is my very good friend. And if you want to stay in America, you should be with Will Bolcom because he shares with you a love of jazz and also you have a skill for the orchestra. So I think you would learn a lot from Bolcom. So go later, and I never got to work or even meet Kurtag, unfortunately, which I regret to this day, but I did get to work with later with Louis Andriessen in Holland and with Henri Dutilleux in Paris. So those were two really great musicians. So I was very lucky. But Michigan was really with Bolcom that I went there to work with him. And at the time he was on sabbatical. So I worked with William Albright, who was also a great teacher. And from them, I really got this notion of the composer performer as something unusual and interesting, and something that I could really relate to as a clarinetist. So that's why I went, was to study with William Bolcom.
I was thinking of William Albright. His music is not easy.
No.
Now that I think about it, I remember playing some of his pieces are very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I just recorded a whole disc of his music
Yeah.
because I play with the Copeland House, and I when I was with him, I played some of these pieces. When I studied with him, I also played their music, which was great, for learning about the composer and, how their music works from the inside also.
Mm.
But yeah, Albright was also a very wonderful teacher in many ways. A difficult person who had a lot of problems, personal problems, and eventually, I think to myself now, I'm at the same age when he died.
Mm. Wow.
So,
And how many years were you at Michigan? If
well,
I,
I was there for about 4 years, and then I came back after I went to Europe. So I returned from my year and a half in Europe, and I finished my uh, doctoral work, and then I went to New York.
and Derek, did you while at Michigan did you also have a chance to study with the other teachers?
Oh yeah. Oh,
That's what I remember hearing this that conductor composers at Michigan they will get to work with all of the teachers, which I thought was what a great idea, no?
oh yeah, yeah. I worked with Michael Dougherty a little bit, and I worked with um,
Evan
at that time,
Chamber.
Leslie Bassett. I used to go to his house,
Ah,
and I
Leslie
even went to
Bass.
Ross Lee Finney's house my first year. He was 89 at the time, and he basically kicked my ass. I mean, he just said, "This is terrible. What are you doing?" It was very funny, but he was very, very cranky, like a cranky old man, but very funny. I mean, it was funny to be. What is this? You know, uh, and it was an interesting lesson I had. Very abused to say, but and I love Leslie Bassett. What a sweet, sweet man, and had very good things to say. I brought him a band piece. I remember. Um, but I worked with many teachers. I worked with, whenever I could, like with Paul, to get wisdom out of those great teachers. George
Mhm.
Shirley, um, the voice teacher, I played for some of his students, and I had an a cappella group there, which had many of his students in the group. We sang like gospel and jazz and things like that, pop music, and Willis Patterson. I learned a lot from him, and he was a great expert in African American art song. So he was like maybe one of the great scholars of Black art song, and brought many composers whose names were completely unknown. He published their music. Um, of course, I worked with Michael Udow when I came back from Africa, to show him the xylophone, and he gave me some tips. And there were so many great Bob Reynolds. I mean, another incredible conductor.
You were with Gustav Mahler. I came. My first year it was with Kisler. He left
Oh,
already. Yeah.
yeah. Well, also a great musician, but
Yeah.
Gustav, I was so lucky because I decided one year I was going to do the competition, the
Concerto
concerto
competition.
competition, and I played William Boltham's concerto. So Gustav conducted, and then he took me to many orchestras around the country conducting that piece. So I had all this professional experience in my first couple years as a soloist, outside out of Michigan. So that was very interesting for me, and I learned a great deal about him, how he worked on scores. I just watch him working, but a wonderful man, very, very modest, and he really knew a lot about Mozart. And
I did study with Gustav Mahler at the Cabrillo Festival. He was still alive with
oh,
Marin Alsop also.
with
Yeah.
Marin, well, because
Yeah.
Marin is brilliant. I mean, yeah.
Yes, I was.
Oh, that must have been great to study with Marin.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. So it was a summer, intense summer. Yeah,
Yeah, it is an intense place. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Huh.
Well,
Oh, wow.
yeah, yeah. Derek, the time is passing, and we have two minutes to go. And I don't know if you would like to share some of your pieces, or only if you like. It's not there's no pressure.
Oh. I think people can go, they can go on YouTube
Okay, okay.
and Spotify. A lot of my stuff is on Spotify, I think, hopefully it's there, and YouTube. So if people
I,
type in,
when we finish this conversation, I will put a link so people can go into Spotify and watch you. I mean, this conversation has been so amazing that I don't want you to put a video and stop talking.
I know. No, it's great. It's great to speak to you and hear, and just, it was so nice to look at what you've been doing and the many ways that you're engaging in music, from the kind of, on all these different levels of teaching, of sharing music with young people, of doing opera, and it's such a wonderful contribution. And I'm sure in Chile and beyond, people are really benefiting from your contribution, and it's making such a difference.
Just thinking about what you mentioned before, and I did get stuck in that word, which was transformation. For me, this is what music is. Music's an agent of transformation, and I love that because I tell myself this all the time. Like we as artists, we have the, I wouldn't say the power, but we have this tool that we can use to transform lives, and I strongly believe this. And most of my projects, especially the ones that I love the most, they all have to do with that. That we need to be agents of transformation.
Yeah, well, in doing so, I think we have to transform ourselves in order to
Absolutely.
transform others. But we have to be open to input, and at least have the humility to recognize that there's so much depth out there, that we can even just tap into a little bit in our lifetimes and transmit through ourselves to others. But the world is so big, and there are so many people, which is why it's great you're bringing all these people together each week to talk, because really no one of us has the world within them. We're all composite of a larger thing. Like when you're conducting resurrection and you look out and you see it's not you making the music, it's all people together, and then all the people who receive it in that big hall. And I saw and was thinking, what a great moment of sharing, and also that we all, one of the things I'm so impressed with by watching you both in your talks and in your work is just the humility of your understanding that you're just part of a larger thing, which is wonderful to feel that with a conductor, because I think one can get drunk with power, but to recognize that, that you are one part of this large thing. As a composer too, we're just a small part of something very, very big and mysterious, and but also inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Derek, thank you so much for sharing your time this morning. And I mean, we could stay here for another hour, no?
No, 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 no.
So
Gotta
curious to
get to work.
know more about your life and your music. So thank you again for being here with us. And we had few people that were watching us. Maria Sampen was around.
Oh,
And
she's great. What a great musician.
yes, yes. So thank you again for this morning, and I wish you the best, and please let's stay connected so we can create something incredible together.
Yes,
Yeah?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Don't wait another 20 years.
Absolutely. So thank you
Okay,
so much.
gracias. And
Gracias.
gracias, Sebastián.
Thank you everyone for being here this morning, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye bye.
Hasta luego. Chao.
Ciao.